go straight into it. Tell me about legal aid. How does it work? Because in my head, I think it's like in Suits when Mike Ross is giving help to the clinic, and I'm like, is that what legal aid is? Like, how does it actually work? How do people pay for it? Like, give me the lowdown.
It's a strange one because even when I was studying law, I didn't really know what legal aid was. Because when you go to all of the legal sort of clinics or whatever that are run at uni at the careers fairs, they're all pretty much corporate stuff.
Yeah,
And a lot of people get thrown into that corporate line of work because it's all that they are told is out there for lawyers, right?
yeah,
But the
yeah,
longer I did that, and the longer that I spoke to people who were jumping onto those grad schemes, I realized that I really couldn't pretend to care about mergers and acquisitions and corporate takeovers and stuff. And I
good.
remember, well, perhaps not as good for my pocket, but yeah, I guess good for society. But I just remembered why I wanted to do law, right? And the reason I wanted to do law is because I grew up in an area where disenfranchised people couldn't necessarily afford legal representation, but needed high quality legal representation. And
Yeah,
that's what legal aid is. So legal aid isn't necessarily pro bono, the same way that Mike was at pro bono clinics and suits where he wasn't getting any remuneration. Legal aid is
yeah,
taxpayer funded, but not everything comes within the scope of legal aid. So you couldn't get legal aid for conveyancing or whatever. You can only get legal aid for immigration or asylum cases, and even then, only where you're being threatened with persecution in your country of origin, for example, right? And that's all means tested, and
yeah,
it tends to be the most disenfranchised members of society that need legal aid because more often than not, it's the people without a voice or the ones who have suffered real ills at the hands of the state that nobody necessarily wants to listen to and have the hardest
yeah.
battles to fight, right?
Damn, bro, that's a very honest assessment because most people normally just do it for the bag. So all they want is the money, and then they just dip. That's it, and they'll
I
sell their
get
soul
paid. I get
for like a
paid. Don't get
random
me
cause
wrong.
to some millionaire.
I get paid.
No,
I'm not
of
working for
course,
free,
but
but
I doubt you get paid as heavily as anybody else who's like at the real top end of law.
yeah. So on average, I'd say for someone who's got 6 years of qualification experience under their belt, working in the postcode that I work in, I reckon
Yeah,
I'm taking home a third of what the corporate lawyer up the road is taking home, realistically.
that's
But
mad.
I'm in love with my clients, and I work in a team that's not just like a family, but like an army. And I look at myself in the mirror every day, and I'm not dreading going to work, you know. And that, for me, you can't put a price on that, man.
That's a big W, man. A lot of people don't have that privilege. But hang on, you were saying that you're government funded, so does that mean you guys are going to go on strike next?
Well, no, I mean the work is taxpayer funded, but it's a private company. So ultimately,
Okay, okay, fine, fine.
ultimately, the way it works is if I bring a case against the Home Office, for example, and I lose, I get paid at a really really shoddy legal aid rate, right? Where it doesn't even make sense necessarily for
Right.
certain people to do that kind of work because of the overheads and so forth. But
Yeah.
if you win, the government has to pay your costs, and they remunerate you at private rate because you shouldn't have had to have brought the litigation. So it's at that point that we take on.
Ah,
So
got
in a
it.
way, you're also incentivized to win because then you do secure the bag. But as anyone knows, if you're going up against the state
Yeah, of course.
in a heavily politicized legal system, it's not always easy to win those cases.
Yeah, they must put up a hell of a fight, man. You must be up against the best and best. The best of the best, should I say.
Yeah, yeah. Put it this way: the last case that I was in court for, our opponent, he was a lord who had to be addressed as a lord. They wheeled out, serious heavy hitters for that case. That was the Rwanda litigation, which we'll no doubt get onto. But yeah,
Yeah,
when the
yeah.
government wants to fight a case, they will fight it, tooth and nail.
Jeez, man. Imagine going up against someone and calling him a lord. You
It's
just feel a
crazy.
little bit intimidated, just a little bit. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that and look, I'll be honest. I know it's
So
tradition.
you dipped after uni.
Sorry, yeah, carry on, carry on.
No, go on, go on.
I was just saying it's
No,
tradition.
no,
It's
no.
tradition in the
You,
courtroom,
you crack on.
to call someone a lord or whatever. It never really sits right with me because I'm a bit like, well, you're ultimately just another man in a room. I needn't call you a lord or whatever, but it's a sign of respect. It's a sign of deference, and it's a traditional thing. But you still go into court and you see people wearing their wigs and their gowns and stuff, and it's all very archaic. All of the wigs are basically blonde locks. They're not designed for ethnic minorities to even be in those rooms, right? And that still hasn't changed. And if you want to let's say you've got a hairstyle that doesn't necessarily permit you to wear a wig. For example, there's a Court of Appeal judge, Lord Justice Rabinder Singh, very respected judge. Now, he obviously wears a pug, and he was one of the first people that I could remember as a barrister who was conducting advocacy without a wig, because a pug was a religious item, right? And you can't be discriminated against in the courtroom. But then I've also got a lot of black friends, and even though it may not be religious, it's an inherent part of their identity to wear their afro the way they wear their afro. And the wig simply doesn't work. The wig doesn't work with that, right? But they aren't necessarily met with the same level of flexibility by certain courtrooms that other people in other sectors are. So it's always an interesting one. It's always an interesting one.
So you do have to wear a wig. I didn't think that. I thought yours was dealt by like emails and stuff, because that's the biggest difference between being a solicitor and a lawyer, isn't it? They're two very separately involved people.
So it's the barristers that wear the wigs, right? So that lord that I was speaking about as a barrister, and Rabinder Singh that I was speaking about was a barrister, but he's now a Court of Appeal judge. I would be sat behind them in the courtroom, having signed up the client, obtained the evidence, taken the witness statements, tried to help formulate the legal argument, prepare the case as well as I could, and it goes over to the barrister to present if you're in the High Court, the Court of Appeal, or the UK Supreme Court, which is the higher courts, right? But if I'm dealing with a bail application or an appeal against a refusal of asylum, that's at what people would call the lower courts, and that's where I'll conduct my own advocacy. So I'd be doing the whole thing myself there.
Got it. But the question is, do you wear the wig? Yes or no?
No. Come on, man. I don't get paid every week to wear a wig. Come on, man. Come on. No, I wouldn't be allowed to. That is reserved. That is reserved for barristers.